On December 10th, 2015, in the Brazilian city of Petrolina, in the state of Pernambuco, the Evangelical College of Petrolina was celebrating the end of the school year. The school, known for its high educational standards, was filled that day with the joyful voices of children, music, and a festive atmosphere. Parents gathered to watch their children's performances, and teachers proudly observed their students. Among the students was 7-year-old Beatriz Mota, a cheerful girl with a bright smile and kind eyes. Beatriz came to the celebration with her parents, Luciana and Serlir Mota. The Mota family was well respected in Petrolina. Luciana worked as a civil servant, and Serlir was a government official. They were proud of their daughter, who showed great academic ability and was beloved by her classmates. The school festival proceeded according to the usual script. Children demonstrated their talents, singing, dancing, and performing theatrical skits. Beatriz was also scheduled to perform with her class. After her performance, she stayed close to her parents. Around 9 o'clock, Beatriz asked her mother's permission to go to the bathroom. Luciana let her daughter go, not knowing she would never see her alive again. Approximately 15 to 20 minutes passed, but Beatriz didn't return. Luciana began to worry and went looking for her daughter. She checked the bathroom, asked Beatriz's classmates, but no one had seen the girl. The anxiety grew with each passing minute. The girl's father joined the search, followed by teachers and other parents. They searched classrooms, hallways, and sports grounds, all without results. Beatriz seemed to have vanished into thin air. Around 10 o'clock, the school administration decided to call the police. The celebration was interrupted, and everyone present was questioned about whether they had seen Beatriz and in which direction she might have gone. No one could have imagined that something horrible had happened, on school grounds full of people, during a festive event. The search had already been going on for several hours. Police officers methodically examined the entire school grounds, interviewed witnesses, and checked surveillance cameras. Close to midnight, one of the officers decided to check the school's unused gymnasium, a space that had long been out of service and was closed to students. Opening the door and shining his flashlight, the police officer saw a small body on the floor. It was Beatriz. The initial examination showed that the girl had received several stab wounds to the chest area. It was obvious that the child was dead. News of the terrible discovery instantly reached the parents. Luciana Mota's scream upon learning of her daughter's death was heard by everyone present. Serlir Mota, Beatriz's father, couldn't believe what had happened. In an instant, the festive evening had turned into the worst nightmare for the Mota family. The school grounds were cordoned off by police. All those present were asked to stay for questioning. Crime scene investigators, forensic experts, and prosecutors arrived at the scene. Meticulous work to collect evidence began. The preliminary conclusion of the medical examiners confirmed that death had occurred from multiple stab wounds. Based on the nature of the wounds, specialists suggested that a knife with a long blade had been used. It was difficult to establish the exact time of death, but the experts preliminarily indicated a time window between 9 and 10 o'clock, precisely when the girl had asked her mother's permission to go to the bathroom. News of the tragedy at the Evangelical College of Petrolina quickly spread throughout the city, and then throughout Brazil. The brutal murder of a child within the walls of an educational institution shocked the public. People couldn't understand how something like this could happen in a school full of people during a festive event. The school, which should have been a safe place for children, had become the site of a horrible crime. The day after the tragedy, a special investigative team was formed. The investigation was headed by an experienced detective from the civil police of Pernambuco state. The investigators faced a difficult task: to find a killer who had committed a crime in a crowded school where there were hundreds of potential witnesses. First, everyone who had been present at the school festival was interviewed: teachers, technical staff, parents, students. The investigators tried to reconstruct the chronology of events, to find out who had last seen Beatriz, who could have been near the unused gymnasium. Checking the surveillance camera footage didn't yield significant results. As it turned out, the cameras didn't cover the area near the unused gym, and there was no surveillance system in the facility itself. This significantly complicated the investigators' work. During the inspection of the crime scene, forensic experts found several important pieces of evidence: blood traces, fingerprints, fabric fibers. However, the main problem was that the crime scene hadn't been properly isolated in the first hours after the body was discovered. Many people, police officers, medics, school staff had entered the premises, potentially compromising the integrity of the evidence. The investigators considered several versions of what had happened. The first version was that the murder had been committed by a school employee or one of the parents present at the celebration. The second was that an outsider had infiltrated the school. The third was that the crime had been committed by a teenager, possibly a high school student. Each version had its weaknesses, but the investigators methodically checked all possible scenarios. Special attention was paid to verifying the alibis of all adult men who had been at the school that evening. School employees, parents, and invited guests were checked. Each had to explain where they had been between 9 and 10 o'clock. In parallel, laboratory tests of evidence collected at the crime scene were being conducted. However, the process was slow due to bureaucratic delays and the limited resources of the forensic laboratories in Pernambuco State. The first weeks of the investigation didn't bring significant results. The investigators had collected a huge number of testimonies but couldn't trace the killer. The public began to express dissatisfaction with the police work, and the Beatriz family felt that justice was slipping away with each passing day. The shock of losing their beloved daughter gave way to determination for Luciana and Serlir Mota to seek justice. They couldn't accept that their child's killer remained free, and the investigation was stalling. The Mota family began their own struggle, a fight for truth and punishment of the guilty. Luciana Mota, despite her deep grief, showed incredible strength of spirit. She began studying the case materials, meeting with police officers, prosecutors, and journalists. Serlir supported his wife in all her endeavors. Together, they founded the Justice for Beatriz movement, Justiça por Beatriz, which quickly attracted public attention. Social media became a powerful tool in their fight. The movement's Facebook page gained thousands of followers in a short time. People from all over Brazil expressed support for the family and demanded that the investigation be expedited. The hashtag #Justiça por Beatriz became popular in the Brazilian segment of Twitter. Luciana gave interviews to all interested media, appeared on television, and participated in radio programs. She talked about her daughter, about what she was like: kind, smart, curious, and each time she called on the authorities to do everything possible to catch the killer. The Mota family organized peaceful demonstrations in Petrolina, drawing attention to the case. Hundreds of people took to the streets with portraits of Beatriz and placards demanding justice. The public movement grew, but the official investigation seemed to be treading water. Several months after the tragedy, Luciana and Serlir Mota faced their first serious disappointments. They discovered that many pieces of evidence had been collected with violations of procedural norms. Some potential witnesses had not been properly questioned, and versions that seemed promising to the family had not received due attention from investigators. We realized that if we just wait for results from the police, we would never know the truth, Luciana said in one interview. So we decided to fight ourselves, not for revenge, but for justice. So that Beatriz's memory would live on, so that her death would not be in vain, so that other children would be safe. Their fight was long and difficult. They faced indifference from officials, bureaucratic obstacles, and threats. But Beatriz's parents didn't give up. Their Justice for Beatriz movement became a symbol of the fight against injustice and impunity in Brazil. A year after the tragedy, the investigation into Beatriz Mota's murder had not advanced. The initial investigative team was disbanded, and the case was transferred to other detectives. The new investigators started almost from scratch, studying the collected materials and trying to find overlooked leads. The leadership of the Pernambuco police changed, and new approaches and a fresh perspective on the case were promised. However, this did not bring substantial results. Criticism of the police work from the public and the media grew. Journalists pointed out numerous mistakes and omissions in the investigation. One of the main problems was the improper preservation of evidence from the crime scene. Because the place where the body was found had not been properly isolated in the first hours, many potentially important pieces of evidence were destroyed or contaminated. This significantly complicated the work of forensic experts and reduced the chances of identifying the perpetrator through DNA or other physical evidence. Suspects appeared and disappeared. First one, then another person came into the focus of the investigators' attention, but each time it turned out that there was insufficient evidence of their involvement. Some suspects had alibis, others did not match the profile of the criminal compiled by criminal psychologists. By December 2017, 2 years after the murder, the investigation had officially reached a dead end. The Pernambuco police acknowledged that they could not establish the identity of the killer despite all efforts made. The case remained open, but active investigation was effectively suspended. This caused a new wave of public outrage. The Justice for Beatriz movement, led by the girl's parents, organized a large-scale protest in Petrolina. Thousands of people took to the streets, demanding the resumption of active investigation and the involvement of federal resources. Luciana Mota, in her speech at the rally, said, "2 years have passed, and my daughter's killer is still free. Perhaps he walks the same streets as we do. Perhaps he sees our protests and laughs at the powerlessness of the police. But I promise that I will not give up until justice prevails." By 2019, after 4 years of fruitless investigation at the state level, it became obvious that the intervention of federal authorities was necessary. The Beatriz family, supported by the public movement and some politicians, began a campaign to transfer the case to the federal police of Brazil. The process was complex and lengthy. There were legal obstacles to transferring the case to the federal level, as murder was considered a crime under state jurisdiction. Special grounds were required for the federal police to take control of the investigation. Luciana and Serlir Mota met with senators, deputies, ministers, trying to gain their support. They collected more than 100,000 signatures on a petition to transfer the case to federal authorities. The Justice for Beatriz movement organized protest actions not only in Petrolina, but also in the capital of Brazil, Brasilia. The media played a significant role in this struggle. Journalists conducted their own investigations, revealed mistakes made by the state police, and drew attention to the case at the national level. Documentaries and series of reports appeared, dedicated to Beatriz's murder and her family's fight for justice. In 2021, after a long legal battle and under public pressure, the decision was made to transfer the case to the federal police of Brazil. This was a significant victory for the Mota family and all who supported their struggle. "This is not the end of the road, but only its beginning," Luciana Mota told journalists after the announcement of the transfer. "But now we have hope. Hope that federal investigators will be able to do what the state police could not find my daughter's killer." The federal police of Brazil had greater resources, better forensic laboratories, and more experienced investigators. A special unit was formed to investigate this high-profile case, which by that time had become a symbol of the fight for justice in Brazil. The federal police began the investigation with a clean slate. All previously collected materials were carefully reviewed, analyzed, and systematized. The investigators discovered numerous omissions in the work of the state police, unexplored versions, and unquestioned witnesses. Special attention was paid to forensic evidence. The federal police had more modern technologies and methodologies, which allowed them to take a fresh look at the collected evidence. Repeat examinations of DNA materials, fingerprints, and clothing fibers found at the crime scene were conducted. The investigators re-interviewed key witnesses, teachers, parents, students who had been present at the school festival on the day of the murder. Some details, previously overlooked, now came to light. Particular attention was paid to those who might have seen Beatriz after she had asked to go to the bathroom. One of the new directions of the investigation was checking all persons who had access to the school grounds, including technical staff, security, and temporary workers. Their backgrounds, possible criminal connections, and behavior before and after the murder were checked. In parallel, work was being done to create a psychological profile of the killer. Forensic experts analyzed the nature of the crime, the characteristics of the wounds, the choice of location and time of the attack. This allowed them to narrow the circle of suspects and focus on individuals who match certain behavioral characteristics. By the end of 2021, the investigators had their first serious leads. DNA analysis conducted in the laboratories of the federal police using the latest technologies made it possible to identify genetic material that could belong to the perpetrator. This information became key for the further investigation. Luciana and Serlir Mota were in constant contact with federal investigators. They regularly received updates on the progress of the investigation, although many details were not disclosed to them for reasons of secrecy. But even the limited information gave hope that justice would finally prevail. After so many years of disappointment, we finally see light at the end of the tunnel, Luciana said in an interview. Federal investigators are doing what should have been done from the beginning. They are leaving no stone unturned, checking every detail. And I believe they will find my daughter's killer. The year 2022 became a turning point in the investigation of the Beatriz Mota case. Federal investigators, studying the case materials and conducting new examinations, discovered previously unnoticed evidence that pointed to a specific suspect. It turned out to be Marcus Rana, man who, on the day of the murder, had worked as a temporary employee at the school, helping to organize the celebration. Repeated DNA analysis, found on Beatriz's clothing, with high probability pointed to Rana. In addition, investigators established that the suspect did not have a solid alibi for the time of the murder. In his initial testimony, he claimed that he had been in another part of the school, but new witness testimonies refuted this version. Additional evidence was obtained after analyzing Marcus Rana's phone conversations and social media activity. It turned out that after the murder, he had suddenly changed his behavior, deleted his social media accounts, changed his phone number, and even moved to another city. Rana's psychological profile also matched the criminal profile compiled by experts. He was found to have tendencies toward violence, problems with anger control, and his past revealed episodes of cruel treatment of animals, a known precursor to more serious crimes. As evidence accumulated, investigators began to lean toward the version that Rana had not acted alone. Analysis of the crime scene and the nature of the wounds indicated the possible participation of at least one more person. Several of Rana's acquaintances who had also been present at the school celebration that fateful day came into the police's field of vision. In early 2023, investigators had accumulated enough evidence to request a warrant for the arrest of Marcus Rana and several of his alleged accomplices. The federal judge, after reviewing the presented evidence, issued the warrants. Luciana and Serlir Mota were informed about the impending arrests. After 7.5 years of fighting, justice was finally beginning to prevail. But Beatriz's parents understood that the arrest of the suspects was only the beginning of a lengthy legal process, and there was still a long way to go before the final verdict of the court. In June 2023, special operations to detain suspects in the murder of Beatriz Mota were carried out simultaneously in several Brazilian cities. Marcus Rana was arrested in the city of Fortaleza, where he had been hiding in recent years. 2 more suspects were detained in Petrolina and São Paulo. News of the arrests instantly spread throughout the country. For many Brazilians who had been following the Beatriz case, this became a symbol that even after years, justice can prevail. Thousands of people expressed support for the Mota family on social media, and a spontaneous march took place in Petrolina in memory of Beatriz and in honor of the progress in the investigation. The press conference organized by the federal police after the arrests gathered dozens of journalists from all over Brazil. The head of the investigative team told about the key evidence that had led to the identification of the suspects, but many details of the investigation remained classified until the start of the trial. This is the result of the painstaking work of our investigators, forensic experts, and analysts, the federal police representative stated. But it is also the result of the tireless struggle of Beatriz's family and public support that did not allow this case to be forgotten. Luciana and Serlir Mota made an emotional statement after the arrests. "Today, our daughter can finally find peace," Luciana said with tears in her eyes. "For 7.5 years, we fought for this day. We didn't know if it would ever come, but we never lost hope and never stopped fighting." During preliminary interrogations, Marcus Rana denied his involvement in the murder, despite compelling evidence. The two other suspects also refused to admit guilt. All three were charged with premeditated murder with aggravating circumstances, which under Brazilian law can be punishable by imprisonment for up to 30 years. The investigation continued even after the arrests. Investigators were looking for additional evidence, questioning new witnesses, conducting examinations. Prosecutors were preparing for the upcoming trial, which promised to be one of the most high-profile in Brazilian history. The trial for the murder of Beatriz Mota began in late 2023 and attracted unprecedented attention from the public and the media. Given the public resonance of the case, special security measures were taken. Enhanced security at the courthouse, thorough screening of all attendees, and limited press access. Marcelo Rana and his two alleged accomplices were officially charged with the premeditated murder of a minor with extreme cruelty. All three denied their guilt, insisting that the evidence against them was either fabricated or misinterpreted. The prosecution presented an impressive volume of evidence to the court: results of DNA testing, witness testimonies, surveillance camera footage, analysis of phone conversations, and psychological evaluations of the accused. Special attention was paid to the motive for the crime, which still remained not entirely clear. According to the prosecution's version, Rand's primary motive was sexual, although the investigation found no evidence of sexual assault on Beatriz. It was assumed that the girl had accidentally discovered Rand in the unused gym when he was engaged in something illegal, and he killed her so she couldn't tell anyone about it. The defense of the accused was built on undermining confidence in the collected evidence. The lawyers pointed to violations in the procedure for collecting evidence at the initial stage of the investigation, to potential contamination of DNA materials, to the unreliability of some witness testimonies. They insisted that their clients had become scapegoats after years of fruitless investigation. During the trial, dozens of witnesses were questioned: teachers and school staff, parents and students who had been present at the celebration, forensic experts, and psychologists. Some witnesses recalled details that had not previously figured in the case materials, which complicated the work of both the prosecution and the defense. Particularly emotional was Luciana Mota's testimony in court. She talked about her daughter, about what she was like: kind, smart, cheerful. She described the last moments spent with her at the school celebration, and she shared what the family had gone through over these years, from the grief of loss to the fight for justice. "Today I speak not only as a mother who has lost a daughter," Luciana said, addressing the court. "I speak on behalf of all parents in Brazil who want their children to be safe, so that such a tragedy never happens again." The trial continued for several months. As it progressed, it became increasingly evident that the evidence against Marcelo Rana and his accomplices was quite convincing. Particularly important were the results of new DNA tests conducted using modern technologies that had not been available to investigators at the initial stage of the investigation. The Beatriz Mota case, beyond its immediate legal significance, had a profound impact on Brazilian society and legislation. The tragedy and the subsequent years-long struggle of the family for justice led to a number of important changes in the system of child protection and the investigation of crimes against minors. In 2021, even before the arrests of the suspects, a law known as the Beatriz Mota Law was passed in the state of Pernambuco. It toughened penalties for crimes against children and adolescents, and also established new safety standards for educational institutions. The law mandated the presence of surveillance cameras in all schools, strict control of access to educational institutions, and special training for personnel on security issues. The Evangelical College of Petrolina, where the tragedy occurred, underwent significant changes. The unused gymnasium that had become the site of the murder was demolished, and a memorial garden was created in its place in memory of Beatriz. The school implemented unprecedented security measures, becoming a model in this respect for other educational institutions in Brazil. Luciana and Serlir Mota established the Beatriz Foundation, which addresses issues of protecting children from violence. The foundation conducts educational programs, provides psychological support to children who have suffered from violence and their families, and lobbies for legislative changes at the federal level. "We couldn't protect our daughter," Luciana said in one interview. "But through the foundation, we strive to protect thousands of other children." so that parents don't experience the same grief that we did. The Justice for Beatriz movement, which began as a local initiative of the parents, grew into a national movement against violence toward children. It united thousands of activists throughout Brazil, drew attention to problems of child safety, and became a symbol of civic activity and persistence in early 2024. The court delivered its verdict in the case of Beatriz Mota's murder. Marcelo Rana was found guilty of murder with extreme cruelty and sentenced to 30 years in prison, the maximum term provided for by Brazilian legislation. His two accomplices received shorter terms, 24 and 18 years respectively, for complicity in the crime. The verdict was met with relief by Beatriz's family and thousands of people who had been following the trial. However, the lawyers for the convicted immediately declared their intention to appeal the court's decision, which meant that the legal battle was not yet over. "This is not the end of the road," Luciana Mota said after the pronouncement of the verdict. "But it is an important step toward justice. We will continue to fight, no matter how long it takes." Despite the verdict, many questions remain unanswered. The motive for the murder was not fully clarified during the trial. Marcelo Rana never admitted his guilt and did not explain why he committed this terrible crime against an innocent child. The Beatriz Mota case has become a symbol of both the tragic failure of the child protection system and the power of parental love and public solidarity. It showed how ordinary people can fight against injustice and achieve changes that seemed impossible. Today, if you visit Petrolina and enter the memorial garden on the grounds of the Evangelical College, you will see a beautiful statue of a little girl with a book in her hands. This is a monument to Beatriz, a girl whose life was so cruelly cut short, but whose legacy continues to live on. Every day, people come to the monument leaving flowers, toys, notes. School children, their parents, tourists, passers-by. Many of them never knew Beatriz personally, but her story touched their hearts. Luciana and Serlir Mota continue their work through their daughter's foundation. They speak at conferences, meet with politicians, and support other families who have lost children to violence. Their fight for justice for Beatriz has grown into a broader mission to create a world where every child can feel safe. "Sometimes I feel that Beatriz is next to me," Luciana once confessed. "And in these moments, I promise her that I will never stop fighting, not just for her, but for all children who need protection." This is a promise I intend to keep. The story of Beatriz Mota and her family's fight for justice remains unfinished, but already it has become a powerful reminder that even in the darkest situations, the light of truth can ultimately prevail, and that the memory of an innocent victim can become a catalyst for positive changes in society.